He wanted his new fiancée to see how he upgraded from his college ex, but the champagne glasses crashed to the floor when 3 mini versions of himself ran through the crowd calling him Papa. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. The pregnancy test trembled in Sofia Martinez's hands, the 2 pink lines unmistakable against the white background. She stared at it, her breath catching in her throat as she sat on the closed toilet lid in the cramped dormitory bathroom. The expensive brand of the test, a splurge she could barely afford, contrasted sharply with her drugstore makeup case resting on the sink. 21 years old. 1 semester left at Princeton. A full scholarship that had been her ticket out of her working-class Boston neighborhood. And now, pregnant. Sofia closed her eyes, one hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. 3 years with Mason Reynolds, charming, wealthy, with a family name that opened doors she couldn't even knock on. 3 years of feeling like she needed to prove herself worthy of being in his world, of straightening her accent when meeting his friends, of working twice as hard to belong in spaces that welcomed him effortlessly. "It'll be okay," she whispered to herself, tucking the test into her pocket. "We love each other. We'll figure this out." The ancient radiator clanked and hissed as Sofia moved around the small dormitory room she shared with Mason on weekends, technically against university rules, but the housing administrator overlooked it, as they did for most students from families with buildings named after them on campus. She arranged the fold-out table carefully, covering the scratched surface with a clean towel that doubled as a tablecloth. The cheap candles from the dollar store flickered as she placed them in the center, next to the pasta she'd prepared on the communal kitchen's hot plate. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti with jarred sauce, but she'd added fresh basil stolen from the dining hall and grated parmesan that cost more than she wanted to admit. 7 o'clock came and went, then 8. Sofia checked her phone repeatedly, each time finding no messages from Mason. The pasta grew cold. The candles burned lower. At 14 minutes past 2 in the morning, the door finally opened. Mason Reynolds stumbled in, his cashmere scarf hanging loosely around his neck, Ralph Lauren's sweater rumpled but still looking effortlessly expensive. Despite the hour and the obvious smell of alcohol, his sandy hair remained perfectly styled, not a strand out of place. "Hey, beautiful," he slurred slightly, his prep school accent more pronounced when he drank. "Sorry I'm late. Phi Delta party was insane." Sofia stood from the desk chair where she'd been waiting, her legs stiff from sitting so long. "I made dinner," she said quietly, gesturing to the table with its unlit candles and congealed pasta. "That's sweet," Mason said, not looking at the table as he loosened his tie. "Not hungry, though. Had sliders at the party." He flopped onto the bed, kicking off Italian leather loafers that cost more than Sofia's monthly food budget. For a moment, he seemed to notice her silence, her stillness. "Everything okay?" Sofia took a deep breath, her fingers curling around the pregnancy test in her pocket. The digital clock on the nightstand blinked. 2:14 a.m. "I'm pregnant, Mason." The silence that followed seemed to stretch into infinity. Mason's relaxed posture stiffened, his face transitioning from confusion to shock to something harder, something that made Sofia's stomach clench. "You're what?" he finally said, sitting up. "Pregnant." She pulled out the test, holding it between them like evidence. "I took the test today." Mason ran a hand through his perfect hair, mussing it for the first time that night. "That's inopportune." The word choice, so calculated, so cold, sent a chill through Sofia's body. "Inopportune?" she repeated. "You need to take care of this, Sofia," Mason said, standing up now, pacing the small room. "My future is set. I have interviews with Goldman Sachs next week. My father already arranged an apartment in Manhattan." "Take care of it?" Sofia's voice rose slightly. "Mason, this is our baby." "Be realistic," he snapped, all traces of drunken affability vanishing. "A baby now? That's not in the plan." "Plans change," Sophia said, her voice small but determined. "We can make it work. I only have 1 semester left and—" "And what?" Mason interrupted, his voice sharp. "You'll be a young mother with an economics degree from Princeton? And then what? Do you really think you'd fit into my world? A scholarship girl with no connections?" Each word landed like a physical blow. Sophia took a step back, bumping against the desk. "I thought I already was part of your world," she whispered. "We've been together for 3 years." Mason laughed, a hollow sound that contained no humor. "Sophia, be serious. College relationships aren't real life. You were convenient, fun, but a Latin scholarship student with a baby? You'd be a burden to the future I deserve." The cruelty of his words made her gasp. As if a switch had been flipped, Mason began moving around the room, collecting his scattered belongings. A charger here, a textbook there. Then, to Sophia's horror, he pulled her worn suitcase from under the bed and began throwing her things into it haphazardly. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Being practical," he answered without looking at her. "This arrangement is clearly over." "Mason, stop!" Sophia grabbed his arm. "You can't just throw me out. It's 2 in the morning, it's freezing outside." He shook off her hand. "You were never supposed to be living here anyway. It's my dorm." Tears streamed down Sophia's face as she watched 3 years of her life being dismantled in minutes. "Please, Mason, let's just talk about this. I love you." He paused then, straightening to his full height, looking down at her with eyes that held no warmth, no recognition of the thousands of moments they'd shared. "You were never enough, Sophia. I always knew that." Those words, delivered with such casual certainty, shattered something fundamental inside her. Sophia stood frozen as Mason continued packing her belongings, her mind unable to process how quickly her world was collapsing. "The baby," she managed to say, still clutching the pregnancy test. "It's yours too." Mason zipped the cheap suitcase closed with finality. "Get rid of it or deal with it on your own. Don't contact me. You're not worth what it would cost to keep you quiet." He opened the door, gesturing for her to leave. Outside, snow had begun to fall heavily, the December night bitter cold. "Mason, please," Sophia begged, one last desperate attempt. "You can't do this." "I already have." He placed the suitcase in the hallway. "Goodbye, Sophia." The door closed in her face. For several minutes, Sophia stood motionless in the hallway, the pregnancy test still in her hand, her entire body numb. Then, mechanically, she pulled on her too thin coat and picked up the suitcase. The elevator was broken. It always was. So she trudged down 4 flights of stairs and out into the snowy night. The campus was deserted at nearly 3 in the morning, the snow muffling her footsteps as she made her way across the quad. Tears froze on her cheeks as she walked, her mind racing through options that seemed to disappear as quickly as they formed. Her scholarship didn't cover summer housing, let alone medical care. Her savings account held exactly $247.18, all she had managed to save while working part-time in the university library for 3 years. Her mother in Boston would sooner disown her than help with an out-of-wedlock pregnancy. Finally, she reached another dormitory and hesitated before typing a code into the keypad. Moments later, a sleepy voice answered through the intercom. "Hello? Yasmin?" Sophia's voice broke. "It's me. I need help." 5 minutes later, Yasmin opened her door, her expression transforming from sleepy confusion to horrified concern. "My God, what happened?" Sophia stood in the hallway, snow melting from her hair, clutching her suitcase. "Mason," was all she could say before collapsing into her friend's arms. That night, Sophia slept on Yasmin's floor, curled around her still flat stomach, dried tears on her face. Her dreams were haunted by Mason's words, playing on repeat. "You were never enough. You were never enough." The next morning, moving mechanically through the motions of living, Sophia entered the dining hall for breakfast. Her eyes immediately found Mason, sitting with his fraternity brothers, laughing as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't destroyed her world just hours before. As she watched, he glanced up, their eyes meeting across the crowded room. For a brief second, something flickered across his perfect features. Discomfort, perhaps, or even guilt. Then, deliberately, he turned away, continuing his conversation as if she were invisible. In that moment, something hardened inside Sofia Martinez. With shaking hands, she pulled out her phone and checked her bank account. $247. 18. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough to start over. As she walked away from the dining hall, away from the boy who had discarded her and their unborn child without a second thought, Sofia couldn't possibly know that one day she would stand on a gala stage, being introduced as the billionaire who revolutionized clean energy, while the man who rejected her watched from the shadows. The walk away from the dining hall felt endless, each step carrying Sofia further from the life she had planned and deeper into an uncertain future. The crisp Princeton winter air bit at her face, but she barely noticed. Her mind was consumed with a single terrifying thought. She was pregnant, alone, and with only $247. 18 to her name. 3 weeks passed in a blur of nausea and anxiety. Sofia moved through her classes like a ghost, taking notes mechanically while her mind raced through calculations and contingencies. Her scholarship covered tuition, housing, and basic meal plans, but there was nothing for prenatal vitamins, doctor visits, or the 1,000 other expenses that came with pregnancy. "Have you thought about what you're going to do?" Yasmin asked gently one evening as they sat in her dorm room. Since the night Mason had thrown her out, Sofia had been sleeping on Yasmin's floor, her presence technically against housing regulations. Sofia looked up from her economics textbook, the words swimming before her eyes. "I don't know," she admitted. "I've been trying to find information about medical assistance programs, but nothing seems to cover my situation." Yasmin hesitated before speaking. "And have you considered not keeping it?" The words hung in the air between them. Sofia's hand moved instinctively to her stomach. "I can't," she said finally. "I just can't." The next morning, Sofia sat in the campus medical center, waiting for her first prenatal appointment. She had canceled her shift at the library to be there, a luxury she couldn't afford, but a necessity she couldn't ignore. When the nurse called her name, she followed on trembling legs. "Well, Ms. Martinez," the doctor said, squinting at the ultrasound screen, "I see why you've been feeling so sick. You're not just pregnant, you're carrying multiples." Sofia's world tilted. Multiples? As in twins? The doctor adjusted the wand on Sofia's belly, pointing to the screen. 1, 2, 3. Triplets, Ms. Martinez. Triplets. The word echoed in Sofia's mind as she walked back across campus, the ultrasound images clutched in her hand. 3 babies, 3 heartbeats, 3 lives depending entirely on her. That evening, she sat in the financial aid office, the last appointment of the day. Mrs. Winters, a kind-faced woman with silver-rimmed glasses, reviewed Sofia's file with a deepening frown. "I understand your situation is difficult, Ms. Martinez, but I'm afraid your scholarship doesn't cover medical expenses of this nature, especially with a high-risk pregnancy like triplets." "There must be something," Sofia pleaded. "I'm 4 months away from graduating. I've maintained a 3.9 GPA even through all of this." Mrs. Winters removed her glasses, rubbing the bridge of her nose. "Unfortunately, your situation requires specialized care that our student health services cannot provide. The university cannot make exceptions, even for exceptional students." As weeks passed, Sofia's condition became impossible to hide. Her once loose sweaters now stretched tight across her growing belly. The whispers followed her across campus. The scholarship girl who got herself knocked up, the Latina who couldn't keep her legs closed, the gold digger who tried to trap a Reynolds. No one mentioned Mason's name in these rumors. No one questioned his responsibility or his cruelty. His life continued uninterrupted. Parties, internship interviews, graduation preparations, while Sophia's narrowed to a desperate focus on survival. At 16 weeks pregnant, Sophia sat in Professor Hargrove's office, her favorite economics professor and thesis advisor. "I have to withdraw from Princeton," she said, the words like ash in her mouth. Professor Hargrove's face fell. "Sophia, you're one of our brightest students. Whatever's happening, we can find a way." "I'm carrying triplets," Sophia interrupted. "High-risk pregnancy. I need specialized care that I can't get here, can't afford, and can't manage while completing my senior year." Understanding dawned in the professor's eyes. "I see. And the father?" Sophia looked away. "Not in the picture." "Reynolds?" Professor Hargrove asked quietly. Sophia's silence was answer enough. "That's disappointing," the professor said carefully, "but not entirely surprising. The question is, what do you need now?" "A leave of absence," Sophia said. "I'm hoping to return after they're born." They both knew it was unlikely. Single mothers rarely completed degrees at Ivy League universities, especially single mothers of triplets with no family support. The next day, Sophia boarded a bus to Boston, her few possessions packed in the same cheap suitcase Mason had filled the night he threw her out. As Princeton receded in the distance, a single tear slid down her cheek. Not for Mason, but for the future she had worked so hard to build, now slipping away with each mile. Boston greeted her with familiar indifference. The working-class neighborhood where she'd grown up looked smaller somehow, the triple-decker houses more worn, the streets narrower. Sophia stood outside her mother's house, gathering courage before knocking. Maria Martinez opened the door, her expression shifting from surprise to shock as she took in her daughter's swollen belly. "Embarazada?" she gasped. "Sin casarte?" "Mama, please," Sophia began. "I need help." Maria's face hardened. "No te crié para que me avergonzaras así," she hissed. "I didn't raise you to shame me like this." "I had nowhere else to go," Sophia said, tears welling in her eyes. "The father? That rich boy from your fancy school? He left when I told him." Maria laughed bitterly. "Of course he did. What did you expect? That he would marry you? Girls like us don't marry boys like him." "I thought he loved me," Sophia whispered. "Love?" Maria shook her head. "Love doesn't pay bills or feed babies. You were foolish." "Mama, please, just until I figure something out." Maria looked past Sophia to the neighbors' windows, imagining the gossip that would spread if her unmarried pregnant daughter moved back home. "I can't," she said finally. "Father Domingo would never understand." "The church?" "The church?" Sophia repeated incredulously. "What about your daughter, your grandchildren?" "You made your choice," Maria said, her voice hardening as she began to close the door. "Now you live with it." The door shut with a finality that echoed through Sophia's bones. She stood on the porch where she had played as a child, now a stranger, unwelcome in the only home she had known before Princeton. That night, Sophia checked into the Harbor Women's Shelter, a facility for pregnant women in crisis. The room she was assigned had peeling paint and a mattress that sagged in the middle, but it was clean and, most importantly, available. "How far along?" asked her roommate, a hollow-eyed teenager named Keisha. "Almost 5 months," Sophia answered, unpacking her meager belongings. "Triplets." Keisha let out a low whistle. "Damn, girl, that's rough." "Yeah." Sophia sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. "I had a scholarship to Princeton. I was supposed to graduate this spring." "Life comes at you fast," Keisha observed without judgment. "Job plans?" "I start at Rosie's Diner tomorrow, morning shift." The diner job was grueling. Sophia's feet swelled in the cheap sneakers she wore for her 8-hour shifts, her back aching from carrying trays of pancakes and eggs to impatient customers. The tips were decent, her Princeton-polished smile and gentle manner earning her extra dollars from regulars, but nowhere near enough for what lay ahead. After a week at Rosie's, Sophia found a second job as a data entry clerk at a medical billing office. The midnight to 4 a.m. shift left her only 4 hours to sleep before she had to be at the diner at 8, but the job was seated and quiet, a small mercy for her increasingly uncomfortable body. Each night, Sophia would count her earnings, dividing them into envelopes labeled rent, food, and babies. The third envelope held the most money but still seemed pathetically inadequate for the 3 lives growing inside her. At 6 months pregnant, Sophia's belly was enormous. The triplets, all boys according to the free clinic's ultrasound, were developing well but required more nutrients than Sophia could afford to provide. She had begun skipping meals to save money, a practice the clinic doctor sternly warned against. "You need at least 3,000 calories a day," he admonished. "These babies are taking everything you have." "I'm doing my best," Sophia replied quietly, not mentioning the hunger that had become her constant companion. It was a particularly brutal shift at Rosie's when everything changed. The diner was short-staffed, and Sophia had been on her feet for 10 hours straight. As she delivered a tray of burgers to a corner booth, the room began to spin. She heard someone call her name from what seemed like a great distance, and then the world went black. She awoke to the concerned face of a paramedic and the elegant, worried expression of an older woman who had been sitting in the corner booth. "Don't try to move," the paramedic advised. "You fainted." "I can't go to the hospital," Sophia protested weakly. "I don't have insurance." "You're going," the elegant woman said firmly, her Italian accent pronounced. "I'll take care of it." Later, in the emergency room, the woman introduced herself as Isabella DeMarco. "You served me espresso every morning this week," she said, always with a smile, even though you're clearly exhausted and very pregnant. "I need the job," Sophia replied simply. Isabella studied her thoughtfully. "What you need is proper rest and care. The doctor says you're severely anemic and exhausted. This isn't sustainable." Sophia blinked back tears. "I don't have a choice. I have 3 babies coming, and no one to help me." "Perhaps that has changed," Isabella said, taking Sophia's hand. "I own a small import business. I need an administrative assistant, and I have a spare room in my home. Both are yours if you want them." Sophia stared at the woman, unable to process what she was hearing. "You don't know me." "I know enough," Isabella replied. "I know you work harder than anyone I've seen. I know you're intelligent. I heard you helping that young waitress with her calculus homework. And I know what it's like to be alone and pregnant, far from home." For the first time in months, Sophia felt a flicker of hope. "Why would you help me?" Isabella smiled, a hint of sadness in her eyes. "Many years ago, someone helped me when I needed it most. Now it's my turn to do the same." 2 weeks later, Sophia was settled in Isabella's comfortable brownstone in South Boston. Her room was small but lovely, with a window overlooking a tiny garden. The position at DeMarco Imports was straightforward, answering phones, organizing shipment schedules, maintaining the books, but it came with regular hours and a chair with proper back support. In the evenings after dinner, Sophia would study business manuals and market reports, absorbing information with the same intensity that had made her a star at Princeton. One night, in her 7th month, she was flipping through a Forbes magazine when an article about solar energy caught her eye. The piece detailed new innovations in renewable energy storage, with photographs of sleek solar panels and quotes from Silicon Valley executives about the future of clean power. Sophia read the article 3 times, something stirring in her mind. "Energy," she whispered, running her hand over her enormous belly. "Clean energy. I'm going to build something that will change the world for you." As she said the words aloud, one of the triplets kicked vigorously, as if in agreement. For the first time since that terrible night in Princeton, Sophia felt a sense of purpose beyond mere survival. She had lost her planned future, yes, but perhaps she could build something even better, not just for herself, but for the 3 lives depending on her. When Isabella found her asleep at the kitchen table that night, surrounded by notes and magazine clippings about renewable energy, she smiled knowingly. The broken girl she had rescued from the diner floor was transforming before her eyes, hardship forging her into something extraordinary. While Sophia slept peacefully for the first time in months, she couldn't know that on the dawn when her triplets Alexander, Tyler, and William were born, each with the unmistakable emerald eyes and dimples of the Reynolds family, she would make a vow while cradling them. One day, the man who said we weren't enough will see exactly what we're capable of. Isabella's brownstone felt like a sanctuary compared to the harsh realities Sophia had faced over the past months. The comfortable room with its soft bed and clean linens was a luxury she had almost forgotten could exist. Each morning, she would wake to sunlight filtering through lace curtains, momentarily disoriented by the absence of the shelter's institutional smells and sounds. "You slept well?" Isabella would ask, already preparing espresso in the kitchen when Sophia waddled in, her 7-month belly leading the way. "Better than I have in months," Sophia admitted, easing herself onto a cushioned chair at the breakfast table. Isabella's small import business operated out of a converted warehouse near the harbor. On Sophia's first day, she stared in dismay at the office, a chaos of paperwork, unanswered correspondence, and haphazard filing systems. "I apologize for the mess," Isabella said, gesturing around the cluttered space. "My previous assistant left rather suddenly 3 months ago, and I've been managing." Sophia surveyed the disaster with a trained eye. Her economics courses at Princeton had included organizational management, and beneath the chaos, she could see the bones of what could be an efficient operation. "May I reorganize the filing system?" she asked hesitantly. Isabella's eyebrows rose. "You're 7 months pregnant with triplets, and that's your first concern?" Sophia placed a protective hand on her belly. "I need to be useful," she said simply. Within a week, the office had undergone a transformation. Files were organized, correspondence categorized, and Sophia had implemented a digital system for tracking shipments that replaced Isabella's paper ledgers. When she discovered invoices that had gone uncollected for months, she began making polite but firm calls to clients. "You've recovered nearly $12,000 in outstanding payments," Isabella remarked one evening, reviewing the week's deposits. "Where did you learn to do all this?" Sophia looked up from her dinner plate. "I studied economics at Princeton before everything happened." Isabella nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Princeton. That explains much. And the father of your children?" Sophia stiffened. "He made it very clear he wanted nothing to do with us." "His loss," Isabella said firmly. "A man who abandons his children isn't worth your tears." Tears. Sophia had thought long-dried rose unexpectedly. "I know," she whispered, "but sometimes I still wonder why I wasn't enough." Isabella reached across the table, taking Sophia's hand. "It was never about you not being enough, Kara. It was about him not being man enough to recognize what he had." As the weeks passed, Sophia's organizational skills revealed deeper issues within DeMarco Imports. The company was profitable but inefficient, losing money on certain product lines while others showed promise. At night, after her prenatal exercises, Sophia would study the company's books, looking for patterns and opportunities. "You should expand your Italian olive oil imports and reduce the wine," she told Isabella one evening, presenting a spreadsheet. "The margins are better, and the market is growing. Also, these 3 suppliers consistently deliver late. We should renegotiate terms or find alternatives." Isabella stared at her in amazement. "You did this analysis after hours, when you should be resting?" Sophia shrugged. "It helps me sleep, actually. Numbers make sense to me. They don't lie or abandon you." One evening in her 7th month, Sophia sat at the kitchen table surrounded by business journals and reports. Isabella had subscribed to Forbes, Harvard Business Review, and The Economist, partly to help Sophia stay connected to the business world she'd reluctantly left behind. Flipping through the latest Forbes, an article about renewable energy caught her eye. The piece detailed breakthroughs in solar panel efficiency and battery storage, with glossy photographs of sleek installations powering corporate campuses. Renewable energy market expected to reach $1.5 trillion by 2025, the article proclaimed. As Sophia read deeper, something clicked in her mind. The technology was advancing, but storage remained a critical bottleneck. The batteries used to store solar energy were inefficient, expensive, and often contained toxic materials. "Energy," she whispered, placing her hand on her enormous belly. "Clean energy. I'm going to build something that will change the world for you." As if responding to her words, one of the babies kicked vigorously, followed quickly by the others, a cascade of movement that made Sophia laugh despite her discomfort. Marco, Isabella's son, found her still at the table at midnight, surrounded by notes and magazine clippings. A recent engineering graduate from MIT, he'd been quietly impressed by Sophia's business acumen since she'd arrived. "Renewable energy?" he asked, glancing at her notes. Sophia looked up, slightly embarrassed. "Just a dream, I guess." Marco sat across from her, picking up one of her sketches, a rough design for a more efficient battery component. "This is interesting," he said, studying it. "You've incorporated biomaterials in place of traditional toxic components." "It's probably naive," Sophia admitted. "I don't have your engineering background." "But you understand markets and business models," Marco countered. "And sometimes the best innovations come from outside traditional thinking." He smiled. "We should talk more about this after the babies come." That night, for the first time since Mason's rejection, Sophia fell asleep with something more powerful than despair or determination in her heart. She felt hope, not just for survival, but for creating something meaningful. As her due date approached, Sophia continued working at DeMarco Imports, now remotely from Isabella's home. She had transformed the company's operations, increasing profitability by nearly 30% through better supplier management and strategic focus. "You have a gift," Isabella told her. "When these babies are born and you're ready, we should discuss making you a proper partner in the business." Sophia was overwhelmed by the offer. "You've already done so much for me." "I recognize talent," Isabella replied simply, "and I know what it's like to need a chance." The contractions began during a video call with an Italian supplier. Sophia had been negotiating better terms when a sharp pain cut through her abdomen, causing her to gasp mid-sentence. "Sophia!" Isabella rushed from her desk. "Is it time?" "I think so," Sophia managed through gritted teeth. "But it's too early. I'm only at 34 weeks. "Common with triplets," Isabella said calmly, already calling for a taxi. "Everything is ready." The ride to Massachusetts General Hospital was a blur of pain and anxiety. Isabella held Sophia's hand throughout, murmuring reassurances in a mix of English and Italian. "Breathe, mia cara. Respira. Your sons are coming to meet you." In the delivery room, surrounded by a team of specialists, Sophia faced the most physically demanding experience of her life. The pain was transcendent, beyond anything she had imagined, but so was her determination. "I can see the first one," the doctor announced. "One more push, Sophia." With a primal scream that channeled all the pain and struggle of the past months, Sophia brought her first son into the world. 2 more exhausting deliveries followed in quick succession. 3 healthy boys, the doctor announced triumphantly. Small, but strong. When the nurses placed the swaddled infants in Sophia's arms, her exhaustion evaporated. 3 identical faces gazed up at her with unfocused eyes of an unmistakable emerald green. "They have his eyes," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Isabella looked at the infants, noting not just the distinctive eye color but the deep dimples in their cheeks, features Sophia had once described when talking about Mason. "Would you like me to contact him?" Isabella asked gently. "The father has a right to know." Sophia's face hardened. "He made his choice," she said firmly. "He chose not to be part of this." Later, when Isabella stepped out to call Marco with the news, Sophia was left alone with her sons for the first time. They were arranged in a row in the hospital bassinet, tiny and perfect. "Alexander," she whispered, touching the first baby's cheek. "You will be strong." The infant turned slightly toward her touch. "Tyler," she continued, stroking the second baby's hand, "you will be brave." His tiny fingers curled around hers. "William," she finished, brushing her lips against the forehead of the third, "you will be wise." He yawned in response, his face a miniature mirror of his father's. A nurse entered with forms for the birth certificates. "Names?" she asked brightly. "Alexander, Tyler, and William," Sophia replied without hesitation. "Beautiful. And the father's name for the birth certificates?" The question hung in the air. Sophia thought of Mason, of his cruel dismissal, of his declaration that she wasn't worth what it would cost to keep her quiet. "There's no father," she said firmly. "Just me." The nurse's smile faltered slightly. "We need a last name for the records." "Martinez," Sophia said. "Like mine." "They're mine alone." As night fell over Boston, Sophia lay awake in her hospital bed, watching her sons sleep in their bassinets. They were so small, so vulnerable, yet already she could see hints of the men they would become. Their faces held echoes of Mason, the shape of their brows, the curve of their mouths, but they were uniquely themselves too. In that quiet moment, exhausted but exhilarated, Sophia made a silent vow. She would build something meaningful for these boys. She would show them that their worth wasn't determined by a father who couldn't see beyond his own ambitions. She would create a legacy that would make them proud. "One day," she whispered to her sleeping sons, "the man who said we weren't enough will see exactly what we're capable of." While she cradled her 3 small miracles in that Boston hospital at dawn, Sophia couldn't know that exactly 10 years later, at a gala in Manhattan, the same green eyes that now looked at her with innocence would be the key to a confrontation that would forever change the Reynolds empire. 2 years passed like a whirlwind of diapers, sleepless nights, and stolen moments of clarity. Sophia had transformed Isabella's spare bedroom into a nursery for the triplets, with 3 small cribs arranged against the wall. The boys, now robust 2-year-olds with a riot of dark curls and those unmistakable emerald eyes, were beginning to develop distinct personalities despite their identical appearances. In the small office Isabella had carved out for her in the brownstone, Sophia balanced her role as the newly appointed manager of DeMarco Imports with the relentless demands of motherhood. 3 high chairs lined the kitchen wall, sippy cups and plastic plates stacked neatly beside them. A playpen occupied one corner of her workspace, allowing her to keep an eye on the boys while she worked. Her days began at 5 in the morning, long before the sun rose over Boston Harbor. She would shower quickly, review international correspondence that had arrived overnight, and prepare breakfast before the triplets woke. By 6:30, she was feeding 3 hungry mouths, changing diapers, and dressing squirming toddlers. "Mama work," Alexander, the most verbal of the 3, would announce solemnly as Sophia set up her laptop at the kitchen table. "Yes, Mama works while you play," she would answer, setting out toys and books within their reach. Isabella, now in her 60s and grateful for Sophia's management of the import business, often helped with the boys in the mornings before heading to the warehouse. Marco, completing his master's degree at MIT, would sometimes stop by in the afternoons, bringing engineering journals and technical manuals that Sophia devoured during the precious hours when all 3 boys napped simultaneously. Tonight was one of those rare evenings when all 3 toddlers had fallen asleep by 8, allowing Sophia a few hours of uninterrupted work. She sat at her small desk in the corner of her bedroom, surrounded by technical diagrams and chemical formulas. For months, she had been developing designs for a new type of battery that used sustainable, non-toxic materials, a far cry from the lithium-ion batteries currently dominating the market. Her Princeton economics background gave her insight into market opportunities, while countless hours of self-education in chemistry and materials science had helped her conceptualize a truly innovative approach. where traditional batteries used rare earth metals and toxic compounds, Sophia's design incorporated biodegradable polymers and organic compounds. As the clock ticked past midnight, she finally completed a comprehensive design for the battery cell structure. The pencil dropped from her hand as exhaustion overwhelmed her, and she fell asleep atop her sketches and calculations, her cheek pressed against the paper. She didn't hear Marco enter the room, returning a textbook he had borrowed. He paused at the sight of her asleep at the desk, then gently lifted the papers to see what had kept her working so late. His eyes widened as he studied her designs. "Sophia," he whispered, shaking her shoulder gently. "Wake up." She stirred groggily, momentarily disoriented. "The boys are fine," Marco assured her. "But this—" He held up her battery design. "This is remarkable. How did you come up with this configuration?" Fully awake now, Sophia rubbed her eyes. "It's probably naive. I don't have formal training in engineering." Marco shook his head, pulling up a chair beside her. "That's precisely why it's brilliant. You're not constrained by conventional thinking." He pointed to her use of cellulose-derived membranes. "This approach eliminates the need for cobalt entirely. Do you realize what that means for manufacturing costs and environmental impact?" A small flame of pride flickered in Sophia's chest. "It's just theoretical at this point." "But it doesn't have to be," Marco said, excitement building in his voice. "I have access to MIT's materials lab. With some refinement, we could build a prototype." For the first time in 2 years, Sophia allowed herself to imagine a future beyond day-to-day survival. "Do you really think it could work?" "I think," Marco said slowly, "that you've potentially revolutionized energy storage technology while raising triplets and running my mother's business." The next several weeks saw Sophia and Marco working side by side whenever time permitted. After putting the boys to bed, she would join him at the kitchen table where they refined her designs and discussed material properties. Their shoulders would brush as they leaned over diagrams, their heads bent together in concentration. One night, as they celebrated a breakthrough in the membrane design, the atmosphere between them shifted subtly. Marco looked at Sophia, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time seeing not just his mother's protégé or a brilliant business mind, but a woman. "You're extraordinary," he said quietly. "You know that, right?" Sophia looked away, uncomfortable with the praise. "I'm just trying to build something meaningful for my sons." "And for yourself," Marco added. "It's allowed to be for you too, Sophia." When he leaned forward and kissed her, it was gentle and questioning. Sophia froze, memories of Mason's betrayal flashing through her mind. Marco immediately pulled back. "I'm sorry," he said. "That was inappropriate." "No," Sophia replied, surprising herself. "It wasn't inappropriate, it was unexpected." She took a deep breath. "It's been 2 years since anyone has seen me as anything but a mother or an employee." Marco smiled. "I see you, Sophia Martinez, all of you." Their romance developed cautiously, built on mutual respect and shared ambitions rather than the passionate whirlwind that had characterized her relationship with Mason. Marco never pushed, understanding the walls Sophia had built around her heart. He was content to wait, to prove his reliability through actions rather than words. Meanwhile, Sophia completed her Princeton degree through online courses, studying during the precious hours between the boys' bedtime and her own exhaustion. The day her diploma arrived in the mail, the economics degree she had abandoned when Mason cast her out, she cried for the first time in months. "What's wrong?" Isabella asked, finding her at the kitchen table, the official Princeton envelope in her hands. "Nothing," Sophia said, wiping her eyes. "Everything is finally right." As the boys approached their 3rd birthday, the prototype for Sophia's battery was showing promising results in initial tests. Marco's connections at MIT had provided access to equipment and expertise that accelerated their progress dramatically. However, moving from prototype to commercial product would require significant capital, more than Isabella's modest import business could provide. One evening, as the four adults sat around the dinner table, Isabella, Marco, Sofia, and Marco's father Giuseppe, who was visiting from Italy, the conversation turned to the future of their joint venture. "The prototype works," Marco explained to his father, "but we need at least $200,000 to file patents and develop a proper manufacturing process." Giuseppe, a traditional man who had built his own small business from nothing, looked skeptical. "And where would such money come from? Banks do not lend to startups with no history, especially not to—" He paused, glancing at Sofia. "Especially not to single mothers with no collateral," Sofia finished for him, her voice even. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Isabella shot her husband a warning look. "My family has savings," Marco said finally. "We could invest in the project, but—" He hesitated, looking at Sofia with uncharacteristic nervousness. "But what?" she prompted. "The DeMarco family would be more comfortable investing in a family member," he said carefully. "It would simplify certain legal aspects if we were married," Sofia concluded, instantly understanding the implication. Marco nodded, looking both embarrassed and determined. "Yes. As my wife, you would have access to family capital. The DeMarco name carries weight with local banks and investors." He reached for her hand across the table. "It's a strategic proposal, but I want to be clear. I also care deeply for you, Sofia. And for the boys." Sofia looked at him, this kind, brilliant man who had never once made her feel inadequate or unwelcome. He wasn't Mason. He didn't make her heart race or her knees weak. But perhaps that was a good thing. "I need time to think," she said quietly. That night, Sofia stood in the boys' room watching them sleep. Alexander, Tyler, and William, now approaching their 3rd birthdays, were growing into beautiful, intelligent children. They deserved every opportunity, every advantage she could provide them. "What should I do?" she whispered to their sleeping forms. As if in answer, William stirred in his sleep, his small hand reaching out and finding his brother's. Even unconscious, they sought connection, security. The next morning, Sofia found Marco in the kitchen, preparing coffee. "Yes," she said simply. He turned, coffee pot in hand. "Yes?" "I'll marry you," she clarified. "For the business, for the boys." She paused. "And because you're a good man, Marco DeMarco." 3 weeks later, in a small civil ceremony at Boston City Hall, Sofia Martinez became Sofia DeMarco. The boys, dressed in matching blue suits, played with paper airplanes throughout the brief proceedings, unaware of how significantly their future had just changed. The first meeting with patent attorneys took place the following week. Sofia, now armed with the DeMarco family name and backing, displayed a confidence that surprised even herself as she explained the technology and its market potential. "Mrs. DeMarco," the senior attorney said, impressed by her presentation, "I believe you have something quite revolutionary here." Later that evening, as she researched market competitors, Sofia found herself typing Mason Reynolds' name into the search engine, something she hadn't allowed herself to do since leaving Princeton. A recent article appeared, featuring a photo of Mason at the New York Stock Exchange, his father's hand on his shoulder as they celebrated the public listing of a Reynolds Enterprises subsidiary. The familiar face, still handsome but now with the polished sheen of wealth and privilege, stared back at her from the screen. His arm was draped around a slender blonde woman, both of them smiling with the easy confidence of those who had never known true hardship. Sofia closed the laptop, a new determination settling over her. "One day," she whispered to herself, "he'll see my name in those same headlines." As she signed the incorporation documents for DeMarco Innovations with her new surname, Sofia couldn't imagine that in just 8 years she would be on the cover of Forbes, and that Mason Reynolds would be forced to pronounce that same surname with bitterness and reluctant admiration. The newly framed Princeton diploma hung in Sofia's modest office at DeMarco Innovations, a testament to promises kept. 4 years had passed since the birth of the triplets, and Sophia's life had transformed from desperate survival into something resembling stability. The small startup she and Marco had formed operated out of a converted garage behind Isabella's warehouse, with just enough room for basic lab equipment and a desk. Today marked rejection number 45. Interesting concept, Mrs. DeMarco, but too risky for our portfolio at this time, the gray-haired venture capitalist concluded, sliding her business plan back across the table. Sophia maintained her professional smile. I understand. Thank you for your consideration. Back in her car, a second-hand Honda purchased with her first management bonus from DeMarco Imports, Sophia pulled out her notebook and methodically marked another X. 45 potential investors, 45 rejections. The pattern was becoming painfully familiar. Impressed nods at her technology, raised eyebrows at her revenue projections, and ultimately, hesitation to back a young mother with limited industry connections. That night, after tucking her 4-year-old sons into bed, Sophia returned to her makeshift office. The couch that doubled as a bed on late work nights welcomed her exhausted body as she spread financial projections across her lap. The heating had been turned down to save money, so she draped her coat over herself like a blanket. Her phone chimed with a message from Isabella. Boys asleep, sweet dreams, tomorrow is a new day. Isabella had become the grandmother her sons needed, stepping in whenever Sophia had investor meetings or lab work. Alexander was already showing remarkable aptitude for numbers, completing puzzles meant for children twice his age. Sophia smiled, remembering how he had corrected her grocery calculations that morning. The next investor meeting was in Chicago, requiring her first overnight trip away from the boys. Leaving them with Isabella tore at her heart, despite knowing they were in loving hands. Just until tomorrow night, she promised, kissing each small forehead. Mama has to talk to important people about her batteries. Fix the world, Alexander said solemnly, repeating the phrase she often used to explain her work. In Chicago, Sophia faced rejection number 53, this time from a clean energy investment group that had initially seemed promising. On the flight home, she stared out the window, wondering if she was chasing an impossible dream. The thin wedding band on her finger caught the light, reminding her of the practical arrangement that had given her this opportunity. Marco was waiting at the airport, his kind face a welcome sight after 2 days of polite rejections. How was it? He asked, taking her small suitcase. Another no, she admitted. They liked the technology but questioned our manufacturing scalability. In the car, Marco hesitated before speaking. Sophia, we need to talk. About us. The conversation had been brewing for months. Their marriage, while amiable, had become increasingly strained as Sophia poured every ounce of energy into the business and the boys. There was little left for a relationship that had begun as a strategic alliance. This isn't working, is it? Sophia said quietly. Marco kept his eyes on the road. You're an incredible mother and a brilliant innovator, but I don't think I'm your husband in anything but name. I've tried, she began. No, he interrupted gently. You've survived. You've built something from nothing. You've raised 3 amazing boys, but you've never let yourself love me, and that's okay. Tears threatened, but Sophia held them back. What happens now? Now we make this transition as smooth as possible, for the boys, for the business. He glanced at her. I'm still your partner in DeMarco Innovations. That doesn't change. The divorce proceedings were as dignified as the marriage had been. Papers were signed in the same office where they had drafted their business plan, with discussions of patent applications interspersed with agreements on visitation schedules. Sophia would retain the DeMarco name, maintaining the business continuity they had worked so hard to establish. You deserve more than a business partner, Sophia told Marco on their last night as husband and wife. You deserve someone who can give you their whole heart. And you deserve to heal, he replied. Maybe someday you'll let someone in again. With the divorce finalized, Sophia threw herself even more intensely into the business. Rejection letters continued to pile up, 64, 71, 78, each one fueling her determination rather than diminishing it. She slept in the office more frequently now, using precious daytime hours with the boys and working through the night. The breakthrough came unexpectedly at rejection number 79. The investor, a junior partner at a small venture capital firm, declined their proposal but added a postscript. "My brother works at Tesla's battery division. Your approach to non-toxic materials intrigued me. Would you mind if I shared your specs with him?" 3 weeks later, an unassuming man in jeans and a t-shirt visited their garage laboratory. Michael Chen, battery development specialist at Tesla, watched silently as Sophia demonstrated their prototype. "The energy density is still 15% lower than standard lithium-ion," she acknowledged, "but the manufacturing cost is 30% less, with zero toxic waste and 98% recyclable components." Michael's expression remained neutral as he examined the data, asked pointed technical questions, and finally tested the prototype himself. After 2 hours, he closed his notebook. "Tesla is exploring alternative battery technologies for our economy line," he said carefully. "This approach is interesting." "Interesting enough to license?" Sophia asked directly, too exhausted for corporate dance steps. A ghost of a smile crossed Michael's face. "I'll need to discuss with my team, but personally, yes, I think it's exactly what we've been looking for." The license agreement negotiations took 6 weeks of intense back and forth. Sophia insisted on retaining certain patent rights while granting Tesla preferential manufacturing terms. When the final documents arrived for signature, the licensing fee, 7 figures with significant royalty provisions, seemed almost surreal. That evening, Sophia took the boys to see the small 2-bedroom apartment she had just put a deposit on. After 4 years in Isabella's home, they would finally have a place of their own. "This is our home?" Tyler asked, running from room to room with his brothers. "Yes, sweetheart. Our very own home." Sophia watched as the boys explored, claiming spaces and imagining possibilities. The apartment wasn't large or luxurious, but it was theirs, paid for with her innovation, her persistence, her refusal to accept defeat. As the twins approached their 5th birthday, distinct personalities emerged despite their identical appearance. Alexander's mathematical mind continued to develop, his ability to see patterns and solve problems already surpassing many adults. Tyler had begun speaking Spanish, connecting with Sophia's heritage in ways that brought tears to her eyes. William, the quietest of the three, revealed an innate understanding of how things worked, dismantling toys and reassembling them with surprising skill. "Mira, Mama," Tyler said one afternoon, pointing to a bird outside their new apartment window. "Un pájaro azul." Sophia froze, emotion overwhelming her. She had neglected her native Spanish since Princeton, where assimilation had seemed necessary for acceptance. Hearing it from her son's lips reconnected her to a part of herself she had almost forgotten. "Sí, mi amor," she replied, her voice thick. "Un pájaro azul muy hermoso." William's engineering intuition manifested shortly after they moved in, when Sophia found him examining the apartment's thermostat. At just 4 years old, he had carefully removed the cover and was studying the wiring inside. "It's not working right," he explained seriously when she gasped in alarm. "The hot stays on too long." Rather than scolding him, Sophia sat beside William and asked him to explain what he saw. His observations, though expressed in 4-year-old vocabulary, showed remarkable insight into the thermostat's function. With the Tesla licensing agreement providing financial stability, Sophia made her first significant hire. Yasmin, her friend from Princeton who had sheltered her on that terrible night. Now, with an MBA in business administration, Yasmin joined DeMarco Innovations as operations manager. "I always knew you'd do something extraordinary," Yasmin said during her first day, looking around the small but growing office space they had leased to replace the garage. "But clean energy? You're literally saving the world, Sophia. I'm building a future for my sons." Sophia corrected, though she smiled at the praise. The DeMarco Innovations logo, 3 interconnected circles representing her sons, now adorned the glass door of their commercial space. Inside, a small team of engineers and business developers worked to expand their battery technology into new applications. Sophia had leveraged the Tesla agreement to secure additional funding, allowing her to hire specialists and accelerate development. 6 months after signing the Tesla agreement, Sophia checked the company's bank account and stared in disbelief at the balance. Just over $1 million in operating capital. Her mind flashed back to counting coins in the women's shelter, dividing meager tips into envelopes for rent, food, and baby supplies. That evening, Sophia invited Isabella and Yasmin to her apartment after the boys were asleep. She opened an inexpensive bottle of champagne, pouring it into 3 water glasses. "To DeMarco Innovations," Isabella toasted, her eyes shining with pride, "and to the remarkable woman who built it from nothing." "To second chances," Yasmin added. "To my sons," Sophia said softly. "Everything is for them." Later, after her guests had left, Sophia stood in the doorway of the boys' bedroom watching them sleep. Alexander's arm was flung protectively over Tyler, while William curled at the foot of the bed surrounded by dismantled clock parts he'd been examining before bedtime. In the quiet darkness, Sophia allowed herself a moment of pure pride. 4 years ago, she had been homeless, pregnant, and abandoned. Tonight, she was the founder and CEO of a promising clean energy startup, with a patent bearing her name and a licensing agreement with one of the world's most innovative companies. She thought briefly of Mason, wondering if he ever thought of her, if he had any idea of the life growing inside her when he cast her aside. The pain of his rejection had dulled, transformed into the fuel that drove her relentless pursuit of success. With her first patent framed on the wall of her new office, Sophia didn't know that within 6 years her innovations would not only transform the energy industry, but also put her on a collision course with the Reynolds Empire in a battle that would transcend business and become deeply personal. 6 years after the birth of the triplets, Sophia stood at the expansive windows of DeMarco Innovations' new headquarters, watching as morning light reflected off Boston Harbor. Their modest commercial space had given way to an entire floor in a sleek office building, with the company logo, 3 interconnected circles, etched prominently on the glass entrance doors. In the laboratory that occupied the East Wing, a team of engineers worked diligently on her latest breakthrough, ultra-thin solar films that could be applied like window tint to virtually any surface. The technology represented a quantum leap beyond traditional solar panels, allowing buildings, vehicles, and even boats to generate clean energy without bulky installations. "Mrs. DeMarco," her assistant called from the doorway, "your 9 o'clock is waiting in the conference room." Sophia nodded, straightening her tailored navy suit, a far cry from the threadbare clothing she'd worn in her early days of motherhood. At 27, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced the worst and survived. Her once wild curls were now smoothed into a sleek bob, and the only jewelry she wore was a simple gold pendant containing tiny photographs of her sons. The Japanese investors listened attentively as Sophia presented the market projections for the solar film technology. Her command of the room was absolute, her knowledge of both the technical aspects and business implications leaving no question unanswered. "Production costs will decrease by 30% once we scale to full manufacturing capacity," she explained, advancing to the next slide, "and the environmental impact assessment shows a 97% reduction in carbon footprint compared to traditional silicon-based panels." As the meeting concluded with handshakes and promises of follow-up discussions, Sophia checked her watch. 4:15. She had missed Tyler's storytelling competition at school. Again. The weight of her absence settled like a stone in her stomach as she texted Isabella, who had attended in her place. "How did he do?" The reply came moments later. "First place, recorded it for you." Relief mingled with guilt, a familiar cocktail that Sophia had grown accustomed to swallowing. The delicate balance between building a future for her sons and being present for their childhood was a tightrope she walked daily, often feeling she was failing on both fronts. At home, a spacious condominium in a good school district, purchased the previous year, Sophia kicked off her heels and braced herself for the whirlwind of energy that greeted her. "Mom!" 3 identical 6-year-olds barreled toward her, their school uniforms rumpled from play. "You missed it! I won the storytelling competition with my renewable energy superhero story," Tyler exclaimed, his green eyes, so like his father's, shining with excitement. "I know, sweetheart. Grandma Isabella showed me the video. You were amazing." Sophia knelt to hug him, breathing in the scent of his shampoo, trying to capture the moment before it slipped away. "Mom, I finished the advanced mathematics workbook," Alexander announced, tugging at her sleeve. "The teacher says I need college-level problems now." William hung back slightly, quieter than his brothers. When Sophia opened her arms to him, he approached with a tablet. "I designed something," he said softly, showing her a rudimentary app interface. "It tracks solar energy collection based on weather patterns." Sophia's exhaustion evaporated as she examined her youngest son's creation. At 6 years old, William had intuitively grasped concepts that many of her engineers struggled with. "This is brilliant, William. How did you come up with this?" He shrugged, pleased by her attention but uncomfortable with praise. "I just thought it made sense." Later that evening, after homework supervision, dinner preparation, and bedtime stories, Sophia sat at her home office desk reviewing production reports. The solar film prototypes were exceeding expectations, but manufacturing challenges remained. As she made notes on potential solutions, her phone chimed with a text from Yasmin. "Hospital called. Isabella not doing well. Come now." The next hours passed in a blur of antiseptic corridors and hushed medical consultations. At 72, Isabella DeMarco had suffered a severe stroke, the second in 6 months. Marco flew in from Chicago, where he now lived with his new wife, and joined Sophia in the hospital room. "She's been working too hard," Marco said, watching his mother's labored breathing. "She refused to retire from the import business, even after your success made it unnecessary." Sophia took Isabella's hand, remembering the day this woman had found her collapsed on the diner floor, pregnant and desperate. "She saved us," she whispered. "She saved me and the boys." 3 days later, Isabella opened her eyes briefly, focusing on Sophia with effort. "My daughter," she murmured in Italian. "You have become the daughter I never had. I am proud." When Isabella passed peacefully the following morning, Sophia felt a piece of her foundation crumble. The woman who had believed in her when no one else would was gone. The reading of Isabella's will surprised no one in its generosity, but shocked everyone in its specificity. She had left her entire stake in DeMarco Imports to Sophia, along with a letter explaining her wishes. "Integrated into your innovations, traditional imports and future technology, merged under the DeMarco name that you have made shine so brightly." As spring turned to summer, Sophia channeled her grief into transformation. She cut her hair shorter, invested in a wardrobe that projected confidence and success, and began the process of absorbing DeMarco Imports into her growing enterprise. The legal legitimacy of the DeMarco name, now strengthened by Isabella's explicit bequest, opened doors that had previously remained firmly shut. "Mom, will we still go to Italy in the summer?" Alexander asked one morning as Sophia rushed through breakfast preparations. The annual trips to Isabella's hometown had been a family tradition since the boys were toddlers. "Of course," Sophia assured him, though she had no idea how she would manage it with the business expansion underway. Some traditions are sacred. The triplets' academic prowess continued to astonish their teachers. Alexander's mathematical ability had advanced to high school level, earning him an invitation to a specialized program for exceptionally gifted children. Tyler, the natural communicator, had developed an ear for languages, picking up Italian from their visits and beginning French lessons at his own request. William, still the quietest, spent hours disassembling electronics and rebuilding them with improvements that sometimes left Sophia speechless. One afternoon, during a rare visit to Sophia's laboratory, Alexander noticed an error in the calculations of one of her senior engineers. The man, with 2 decades of experience and a PhD from MIT, stared in disbelief as the 6-year-old boy correctly identified a computational flaw in his energy transfer model. "Your son just saved us 3 months of development time," the engineer told Sophia later, shaking his head in amazement. "He sees patterns that the rest of us miss completely." The pride that swelled in Sophia's chest was tempered by a nagging thought. These exceptional traits weren't just the result of her nurturing or the educational opportunities she'd provided. The boy's brilliance also stemmed from Mason's genetic contribution, the same man who had deemed them all unworthy of his time or acknowledgement. Summer brought a breakthrough in the solar film technology that captured the attention of industry insiders. A small feature in Forbes magazine mentioned DeMarco Innovations as a startup to watch in the renewable energy sector. Sophia framed the article and hung it beside her Princeton diploma, a tangible marker of how far she'd come. "They called us a female-led clean energy disruptor," Yasmin noted, pointing to the description. "That'll turn some heads in the old boys club." Sophia smiled, remembering how many of those same old boys had rejected her business plan years earlier. "Let's make sure they keep watching." As fall approached, Yasmin placed a report on Sophia's desk that made her breath catch. "Reynolds Enterprises is entering the clean energy market," the headline announced. "Major investment in solar and battery technologies planned." For the first time in 6 years, Sophia deliberately searched for information about Mason Reynolds. The search results displayed a familiar face, now slightly more mature but still bearing the same confident smile she remembered. "Vice President of New Ventures at Reynolds Enterprises," the caption read. "Recently engaged to socialite Catherine Astor." Images showed him at charity galas, yacht parties, and corporate events, the privileged life he had refused to share with her or their sons. In each photo, he exuded the easy confidence of someone who had never faced true hardship, never had to fight for survival. "Our paths will cross again," Sophia murmured to the screen. "But this time, it will be on my terms." Determined not to miss another school event, Sophia hired a professional driver to ensure she could work during commutes and be present for important moments in her sons' lives. She created a special office area within DeMarco Innovations where the boys could come after school, complete with study spaces and age-appropriate science equipment. "Is this where you make the world better, Mom?" Tyler asked on his first visit to the new space. "This is where I try," Sophia answered honestly, "and where you 3 can learn to do the same." The year ended with DeMarco Innovations securing its first international patent for the solar film technology. At a small celebration in the office, an investor who had recently joined their second funding round raised his glass to Sophia. "To the potential billionaire in our midst," he toasted. "Forbes was right to watch you." The term, billionaire, struck Sophia as both thrilling and unsettling. 6 years ago, she had been counting pennies for baby formula. Now, industry analysts were calculating her company's potential valuation in billions. The distance traveled seemed almost incomprehensible. That night, after tucking in her sons, Sophia carefully cut out the small Forbes article that had mentioned her company as promising. She traced the words with her finger, remembering all the rejection letters, all the nights sleeping on the office couch, all the moments of doubt. While clipping the modest article that mentioned her company as promising, Sophia couldn't imagine that in just 4 years her face would be on the cover of that same magazine, in a feature that would force Mason Reynolds to finally acknowledge the DeMarco name in the power circles he so valued. The small Forbes article mentioning DeMarco Innovations soon found company on Sophia's wall of achievements. 8 years after Mason's cruel dismissal, that modest clipping had been joined by feature stories in Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, and Fortune. Each new article chronicled the meteoric rise of what industry insiders now called the most innovative clean energy company on the eastern seaboard. From her corner office overlooking Boston Harbor, Sophia surveyed the empire she had built. DeMarco Innovations now occupied 3 floors of the glass tower, with over 200 employees developing next-generation renewable energy solutions. The solar film technology had revolutionized the industry, enabling buildings, vehicles, and even boats to generate clean power without bulky traditional panels. The Toyota contract is ready for final signature, Yasmin announced, entering with a sleek leather portfolio. As chief operating officer, Yasmin had grown alongside Sophia, her business acumen complementing Sophia's visionary approach. Legal says it's the most favorable terms they've ever seen for a technology licensing agreement. Sophia reviewed the document carefully before signing. The exclusive licensing rights for her battery technology to Toyota's electric vehicle division represented the culmination of 8 years of relentless work. The 9-digit figure on the final page still seemed surreal, more money than she had dared imagine during those dark days in the women's shelter. "Send the boys my love," Yasmin said as she collected the signed contract. "Are they excited about the new school?" "Alexander's already memorized the entire curriculum," Sophia replied with a smile. "Tyler's practicing his proper Boston accent for his new classmates, and William's worried about the engineering lab meeting his standards." The decision to enroll the triplets at Dalton Academy hadn't been made lightly. The prestigious private school represented everything Sophia had once been excluded from: wealth, privilege, connections. It was also Mason Reynolds' alma mater, a fact that gave her a complicated satisfaction. "They deserve every opportunity," she told herself as she signed the substantial tuition checks. If part of her motivation was ensuring her sons would have the pedigree that she had supposedly lacked, she kept that thought private. That evening, Sophia stood in the spacious foyer of her newly purchased penthouse in Boston's exclusive Beacon Hill neighborhood. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased panoramic views of the city skyline and harbor beyond. The triplets, now 8 years old, raced through the expansive rooms, their excited voices echoing off marble floors and high ceilings. "Mom, my room has a telescope spot," Alexander called from the upper level, his mathematical mind already calculating optimal viewing angles for the night sky. "There's a language lab in the study," Tyler exclaimed, discovering the custom space Sophia had designed for his linguistic pursuits. William appeared last, his eyes wide behind wire-rimmed glasses. "The workbench in my room, it has everything. Everything." Watching her sons explore their new home, Sophia felt a profound sense of accomplishment. 8 years ago, she had slept on a shelter floor, cradling her pregnant belly and wondering how she would afford diapers. Tonight, her children were exploring a multi-million-dollar penthouse customized to nurture their exceptional talents. The boys' 8th birthday celebration the following weekend was an intimate gathering, with Yasmin, Marco, and his wife, and a few close colleagues in attendance. Sophia had deliberately kept their social circle small and carefully vetted, protective of her son's privacy and conscious of her own limited time. Alexander unwrapped his gift with methodical precision, his face lighting up at the professional-grade telescope inside. "It's the Celestron Edge HD. It can see galaxies millions of light-years away." Tyler tore through his package with characteristic enthusiasm, revealing an advanced language learning system. "Japanese, Arabic, and Russian. Mom, this is amazing." William opened his present last, gasping at the custom electronics lab kit Sophia had commissioned. "This has components that aren't even on the market yet," he whispered, already examining the specialized tools. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the boys were asleep among their new treasures, Sophia stood on her penthouse balcony. The lights of Boston twinkled below, including the illuminated DeMarco Innovations sign visible on their headquarters building. She thought about the journey, from penniless, pregnant student to CEO of a company valued at over $2 billion. The following month brought another milestone when Alexander entered the Massachusetts State Mathematics Olympiad. Sophia rearranged critical investor meetings to ensure she could attend, sitting nervously in the auditorium as her son, the youngest competitor by 3 years, approached the problem-solving stage. When Alexander's name was announced as the winner, Sophia applauded until her hands hurt, tears welling in her eyes as her son accepted the trophy with characteristic seriousness. His methodical approach to complex problems reminded her so much of herself, the careful analysis, the refusal to be intimidated by difficulty. "I just saw the patterns, Mom," he explained afterward, as if solving university-level mathematics was perfectly ordinary. They were always there. Back at the office, Yasmin handed Sophia the latest market analysis. DeMarco Innovations now has a higher valuation than 90% of companies in the Fortune 500, she noted, and the new floating solar panels have generated interest from coastal cities worldwide. The expansion had been strategic and measured, built on Sophia's unique vision of integrating traditional business approaches with cutting-edge innovation. Isabella's import business, now fully incorporated into DeMarco Innovations, provided established supply chains and international connections that newer competitors couldn't match. As her professional success mounted, Sophia allowed herself one significant personal indulgence, a stunning emerald necklace from Tiffany & Co. The deep green stones matched her son's eyes perfectly, a deliberate choice that commemorated both her professional achievements and her greatest treasures. "Is this an investment or a celebration?" Yasmin asked when she spotted the distinctive blue box on Sophia's desk. "Both," Sophia replied, touching the velvet case. "A reminder of where we came from and how far we've come." The request for a Forbes photoshoot came shortly after DeMarco Innovations' floating solar panel technology was deployed in Boston Harbor, providing clean energy to half the city's municipal buildings. The magazine was planning a feature on Women Revolutionizing Energy, with Sophia as the cover subject. On the morning of the shoot, Sophia sat perfectly still as a makeup artist enhanced her features and a stylist arranged her hair into sleek waves. The emerald necklace gleamed against her tailored white suit, power and femininity balanced in deliberate harmony. "We'd like to shoot in your office with the harbor view," the photographer explained. "The DeMarco panels visible in the background will create a perfect visual narrative." As cameras clicked and lights adjusted, Sophia maintained the composed, confident expression that had become her professional signature. Gone was the frightened girl who had once begged Mason not to abandon her. In her place stood a woman whose determination had transformed an industry. That evening, returning home later than intended, Sophia found a surprise waiting in her home office. A framed drawing created by all 3 boys, depicting her in superhero pose with solar panels as her cape. "For the best mom and CEO in the world," the inscription read in 3 distinct handwritings. "We made it for your magazine cover," Tyler explained as she hugged them tightly. "This means more than any magazine cover ever could," she whispered, hanging their artwork in the most prominent spot in her office. 2 weeks later, an invitation arrived for a charity gala benefiting clean energy research, the kind of elite social event that the old Sophia could never have accessed. The guest list included CEOs, politicians, and old-money Boston families, including several board members from Reynolds Enterprises. Sophia debated declining. She guarded her limited free time jealously for her sons. But the strategic value of networking with potential investors and partners outweighed her reluctance. Yasmin would accompany her, providing both friendly support and sharp business acumen. The evening of the gala, Sophia entered the historic Boston Harbor Hotel in a custom-designed gown that skimmed her curves before flaring gently at the knee. The emerald necklace drew appreciative glances, its value obvious to the wealthy crowd accustomed to assessing such things at a glance. Midway through the evening, as she discussed offshore wind technology with the governor, Sophia's breath caught. Across the crowded ballroom, a familiar profile appeared momentarily in her line of sight. Mason Reynolds, his features little changed in 8 years, laughing with a group of financial executives. He didn't notice her. The irony wasn't lost on Sophia. The woman he had once deemed not enough now moved in the same elite circles he did, yet remained invisible to him. The anticipated confrontation would come, but not tonight. Tonight, she observed from a distance, cataloging the man who had fathered her extraordinary sons without acknowledging their existence. The following morning, Sophia's executive assistant delivered news that sent a ripple of excitement through DeMarco Innovations headquarters. Reynolds Enterprises has expressed interest in a potential partnership on the Eastern Seaboard Solar Initiative. The indirect contact confirmed what Sophia had suspected. Mason's company had finally recognized DeMarco Innovations as a major player worth engaging with. Whether he personally knew of the connection remained unclear, but the corporate courtship had begun. Events accelerated when the Forbes magazine hit newsstands the following week. Sophia's image graced the cover, emerald necklace gleaming against her white suit, the harbor and DeMarco solar panels visible through the office windows behind her. Sophia DeMarco, the green energy revolutionary, the headline proclaimed, with a feature detailing her company's meteoric rise and industry-changing innovations. Yasmin placed a copy on Sophia's desk with a triumphant smile. "They're calling you the most influential figure in renewable energy on the East Coast. Not bad for a single mom who started in a garage." Sophia traced her finger over the cover, remembering the countless nights working while her babies slept, the rejections, the doubts, the moments of near defeat. The journey from that cold Princeton night to this magazine cover seemed almost mythological in its arc. That evening, alone in her office after everyone else had gone home, Sophia held the magazine and whispered to the empty room, "Almost time, Mason. Almost time." While admiring her photo on the Forbes cover, Sophia didn't know that the same magazine would be in Mason Reynolds' hands that night, leading him to obsessively research the woman who had transformed the sector he now competed in, completely unaware that 3 small versions of himself slept in the bedroom next to her office. The magazine slipped from Mason Reynolds' fingers, landing on his mahogany desk with a soft thud. He stared at the cover, at her face, for what felt like hours. Sophia Martinez. Except she wasn't Sophia Martinez anymore. She was Sophia DeMarco, the green energy revolutionary, according to Forbes. 10 years had passed since that cold December night in Princeton. 10 years since he had made what he now recognized as the worst decision of his life. The woman on the magazine cover bore little resemblance to the frightened scholarship student he had discarded. This Sophia exuded confidence and power, her gaze steady and commanding, the emerald necklace at her throat worth more than most people's annual salary. Across Manhattan in her Boston penthouse, Sophia reviewed quarterly projections as her sons completed their homework at the custom-built table in her home office. 10 years had transformed her from abandoned pregnant student to the CEO of DeMarco Innovations, a clean energy powerhouse valued at $4.2 billion. The triplets, now 10 years old, were thriving at Dalton Academy, each developing their exceptional talents in ways that continually amazed her. "Mom, can you check my calculus?" Alexander asked, pushing his notebook toward her. At 10, he was tackling mathematics that challenged college students, his mind constantly seeking greater complexity. "In a minute, sweetheart," Sophia replied, finishing her review of the latest acquisition numbers. The purchase of Nano Solar Tech for $800 million had been finalized that morning, a strategic move that would expand DeMarco's market dominance and technological edge. "Your presentation for the Japanese investors is confirmed for tomorrow," Yasmin informed her, entering with a tablet displaying Sophia's meticulously organized schedule. From terrified friend offering floor space in a dormitory to chief operating officer of a billion-dollar company, Yasmin had remained Sophia's most loyal ally. "Thank you. And what about the Stanford project?" "Confirmed. They're thrilled about the $2 million donation for the Sustainable Energy Laboratory." Sophia nodded, satisfaction warming her chest. Creating opportunities for future innovators, especially female students and those from disadvantaged backgrounds, had become a personal mission. No one should have to overcome the obstacles she had faced. "Mom!" Tyler burst into the office, his school tie askew and his green eyes, so like his father's, bright with excitement. "We won the robotics competition. Our design was selected as the regional winner." "That's wonderful." Sophia rose from her desk, embracing her animated son. Tyler had inherited not only Mason's looks but also his charismatic presence, though tempered with a kindness and empathy Mason had lacked. "And Professor Daniels said my solar algorithm might actually work," William added quietly from the doorway, his expression earnest behind wire-rimmed glasses. The most introspective of the triplets, William combined technical brilliance with an artistic sensitivity that produced truly innovative designs. Sophia gathered her sons close, breathing in the scent of their shampoo, school uniforms, and the indefinable essence that was uniquely theirs. Every success, every milestone, every simple moment like this one was a victory over the man who had deemed them unworthy. The doorbell chimed and their housekeeper appeared with the evening mail. "Special delivery, Mrs. DeMarco, came by courier." Among the business correspondence and invitations lay a cream-colored envelope addressed to Sophia Martinez, a name she hadn't used in years. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the return address made her breath catch. Reynolds Enterprises, 1290 Avenue of the Americas, New York. "Homework first, then dinner," Sophia instructed the boys, tucking the envelope into her jacket pocket. "I need to make a few calls." In her bedroom, door closed, Sophia examined the envelope. The heavy cream stock and embossed letterhead spoke of wealth and tradition. With steady fingers that betrayed none of the turmoil within, she sliced it open with a silver letter opener. Inside was an elegant invitation. Reynolds Enterprises cordially invites Sophia Martinez to celebrate the engagement of Mason Reynolds and Vanessa Hartwell, Saturday the 15th of October at 8 o'clock in the evening, the Reynolds residence, 740 Park Avenue, New York City. A handwritten note at the bottom, in a familiar slanted script, made her stomach clench. "To celebrate my ascension to the presidency of Reynolds Enterprises and my engagement to the Hartwell media heiress, thought you might like to see where real success has taken me. Mr." The arrogance, the casual cruelty, it was so quintessentially Mason that Sophia almost laughed. He had clearly discovered her professional success but remained ignorant of the three boys doing homework in her office. Boys who shared his emerald eyes, his dimpled smile, his genetic brilliance. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Patricia Chen, DeMarco Innovations' Chief Financial Officer. "Sophia, the acquisition announcement hit the markets. Our stock jumped 12% in after-hours trading. We've officially surpassed Reynolds Enterprises in market valuation." A slow smile spread across Sophia's face as she looked again at Mason's handwritten note. "Perfect timing, Patricia. Thank you." Returning to the living room, Sophia found the boys debating the aerodynamic properties of different paper airplane designs, a scatter of folded specimens across the Italian marble floor. "Alexander, Tyler, William," she said, her tone making them look up immediately. "How would you feel about a trip to New York this weekend?" "New York?" Alexander's analytical mind immediately sought purpose. "For business or pleasure?" "A bit of both," Sophia replied carefully. "There's someone I'd like you to meet." "Who?" Tyler asked, ever the curious one. Sophia hesitated, considering how much to reveal. "Someone from my past. Someone who knew me before you were born." William, always the most perceptive, studied her face. "Is it someone important to you?" "He was once," Sophia admitted. "Now he's just someone who needs to learn a lesson about consequences." The following morning, Sophia called her stylist while the boys were at school. "I need something unforgettable for Saturday night. Emerald green to match my son's eyes." 3 days later, the exclusive Versace gown arrived. its deep emerald fabric catching the light like liquid gems. Custom-tailored to Sophia's curves, it projected sophisticated power rather than ostentatious sexuality. When she tried it on, Yasmin gasped. "Mason Reynolds won't know what hit him," she said, circling Sophia appreciatively. "It's not about attracting him," Sophia corrected, examining her reflection. "It's about showing him exactly what he discarded." On Saturday morning, Sophia took the boys shopping for suits. 3 identical charcoal ensembles from the same Fifth Avenue boutique where Reynolds' men had been outfitted for generations. The saleswoman commented on their extraordinary resemblance, not just to each other but to someone familiar she couldn't quite place. "They remind me of someone," she mused, adjusting William's collar. "A regular customer, perhaps." "Perhaps," Sophia agreed neutrally, paying with a platinum card that bore the DeMarco Innovations logo. That afternoon in their suite at the Four Seasons, as the boys explored the hotel amenities with their nanny, Sophia stood by the window overlooking Central Park. New York in October was beautiful, the trees turning gold and crimson, the sky a crisp, clear blue. Somewhere across this glittering cityscape, Mason Reynolds was preparing for his engagement celebration, unaware that his life was about to implode. Her phone chimed with a text from Yasmin. "News of our acquisition made Wall Street Journal front page. Reynolds Enterprises stock down 3% today. Timing is perfect." Sophia smiled at the financial poetry of it all. 10 years ago, Mason had discarded her partially because she would be a burden to the future he deserved. Tonight, she would walk into his engagement party as the CEO of a company now worth more than his family's enterprise. As evening approached, Sophia helped the boys with their ties, impressed by how handsome they looked in their tailored suits. Alexander's serious expression, Tyler's confident smile, William's thoughtful gaze, each reflecting different aspects of their father, yet uniquely themselves. "You look like a queen, Mom," Tyler declared when she emerged in the emerald gown, the matching necklace gleaming at her throat. "Why are we going to see a man we don't know?" Alexander asked directly, always seeking logic. Sophia knelt carefully, mindful of her dress, to meet their eyes. "Sometimes we need to face the past to truly appreciate our present. This man made a choice long ago that changed all our lives." "Is he a bad person?" William asked quietly. "He made a bad choice," Sophia answered carefully. "And tonight, he'll learn that choices have consequences." The sleek black limousine glided through Manhattan traffic, carrying them toward the Upper East Side address. As they approached Park Avenue, Tyler pressed his face to the window, marveling at the ornate pre-war buildings. "These apartments cost more than small countries," he informed his brothers with the confidence of a child who regularly overheard business discussions. "Actually, the average price per square foot on Park Avenue is—" Alexander began calculating before William interrupted. "Mom, are you nervous? Your heart rate is elevated. I can see your pulse in your neck." Sophia smiled at her perceptive son. "A little. It's been a long time since I've seen this person." The limousine stopped before an imposing limestone building. The doorman, recognizing wealth and authority regardless of familiarity, bowed slightly as they approached. "Reynolds' residence penthouse," Sophia informed him, presenting the invitation. The private elevator ascended silently, its mahogany and brass interior reflecting the building's old-world opulence. Sophia used these final moments to center herself, to remember the frightened girl who had trudged through snow with a cheap suitcase and the woman she had become through sheer determination. "Remember your manners," she told the boys as the elevator slowed, "and stay close to me." The doors opened to reveal a spectacular penthouse apartment transformed for celebration. Crystal chandeliers illuminated arrangements of exotic flowers. Live music from a string quartet floated over the murmur of New York's elite in conversation. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, Central Park stretched beneath them, the city lights twinkling against the night sky. For a brief moment, Sophia hesitated, the weight of the past pressing against her chest. Then Alexander took her right hand, Tyler her left, and William stepped protectively in front of her. Together, they moved forward into the light. As they entered the main salon, conversations gradually quieted. Heads turned, eyes widened, whispers began. Sophia DeMarco was instantly recognizable from her Forbes cover and numerous television appearances. But it was the three identical boys beside her that truly captured attention. Three miniature versions of Mason Reynolds, down to the emerald eyes and characteristic dimples. Across the room, Mason stood with his arm around a willowy blonde, both of them laughing with a group of investors. He remained oblivious to the ripple of awareness spreading through his guests until the silence reached him, causing him to look up. His eyes found Sophia first, recognition, shock, and something like fear flashing across his face. Then his gaze dropped to the three boys at her side, and the color drained from his features. While the limousine was reserved and the boys' suits ordered, Sophia couldn't predict that her entrance to that engagement party in Manhattan would not only destroy Mason Reynolds' carefully constructed reputation, but also trigger a series of revelations that would shake the entire power structure of the American East Coast. The world seemed to stop as Mason Reynolds stared across his opulent penthouse at the woman and three boys who had just entered. The string quartet faltered for an instant, then continued playing, the classical notes an absurd counterpoint to the drama unfolding in the center of the room. "Sophia Martinez?" Mason finally managed, his voice barely a whisper as he moved toward her like a man approaching a ghost. "DeMarco," she corrected with perfect composure. "Sophia DeMarco." The casual confidence in her voice was worlds away from the desperate, pleading tone he remembered from that snowy Princeton night. She stood before him in an emerald gown that complemented her olive skin to perfection, the fabric alone likely costing more than a semester's tuition. The matching emerald necklace at her throat gleamed under the chandelier light, its value unmistakable to the wealth-conscious crowd. DeMarco. The willowy blonde at Mason's side stepped forward, recognition dawning in her eyes. "From DeMarco Innovations? The clean energy company?" "The very same," Sophia acknowledged with a slight smile. "And you must be Vanessa Hartwell. Congratulations on your engagement." Mason barely registered the exchange. His eyes had moved from Sophia to the three identical boys flanking her. Three pairs of emerald green eyes, his eyes, stared back at him with varying expressions of curiosity. Three sets of dimples, his dimples, became visible as one of the boys smiled uncertainly. The boy in the middle, slightly taller than his brothers, studied Mason with keen interest. "Mama," he exclaimed suddenly, his voice carrying in the now hushed room. "He's identical to the photos Grandma Isabella kept." Mason's face went ashen. Who are these boys?" he stammered, though the denial in his voice sounded hollow even to his own ears. Around them, conversations had completely ceased. Manhattan's elite, investment bankers, media moguls, old money families, were now fully engaged in the unfolding drama. Smartphones were subtly raised, capturing discrete photos and videos of what was clearly developing into the scandal of the season. "Mason," Sophia said clearly, her voice carrying throughout the elegant space. "Meet Alexander, Tyler, and William. Your sons." The sound of shattering crystal punctuated her words as Vanessa Hartwell's champagne flute slipped from her fingers, crashing to the marble floor. She took an instinctive step back, her eyes darting between Mason and the three boys who were, undeniably, miniature versions of her fiancé. That's not possible," Mason attempted, though his voice lacked conviction. His eyes betrayed him, continually returning to the boys' faces, recognizing his own features reflected in triplicate. The smallest of the three boys, the one with glasses, tilted his head curiously. "You're our father?" William asked, his voice soft but clear enough for those nearby to hear. "Why have you never visited us?" The simple, devastating question hung in the air. Mason attempted a smile, now acutely aware of several major shareholders of Reynolds Enterprises watching the exchange with intense interest. "This isn't... Sophia, we should discuss this privately," he suggested, reaching for her elbow to guide her away from the crowd. Sophia elegantly sidestepped his touch. "There's nothing to discuss privately, Mason. You made your position quite clear 10 years ago." Her voice remained calm, but carried a steel edge that hadn't existed in the girl he remembered. "You said I wasn't enough, remember? That I would be a burden to your future in Wall Street." Nearby guests exchanged shocked glances. A senior partner from Goldman Sachs, one of Reynolds Enterprises' primary financial backers, frowned deeply, his gaze fixed on Mason. "That was a long time ago," Mason whispered urgently, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead despite the room's perfect temperature. "I was young, immature. And now I'm the CEO of the fastest-growing clean energy company in America," Sophia interjected smoothly. "What a coincidence. We just surpassed Reynolds Enterprises in market value this morning." Mason's eyes widened perceptibly. In Manhattan's business circles, status was everything, and Sophia had just publicly announced her superior position in the hierarchy that had once excluded her. The tallest triplet, Alexander, stepped forward, studying Mason with the analytical gaze of a scientist. "Are you the father from school?" he asked directly. "The one Mom said was too busy to know us?" A senior investor from Reynolds Enterprises cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Mason, you have children you've never acknowledged?" The question, asked innocently by a child but echoed with accusation by an investor, created a ripple effect through the gathering. Mason found himself trapped in a nightmare of his own making, the carefully cultivated image of ethical young businessmen crumbling before the innocent questions of children who undeniably carried his DNA. It wasn't like that," he stammered, sweat now visible on his upper lip. "I didn't know—" "Actually, you did know," Sophia interrupted, her voice gentle but firm. "The pregnancy test was in my hand while you threw my belongings into a cheap suitcase." Vanessa Hartwell, who had been watching the exchange in shocked silence, suddenly found her voice. "You abandoned a pregnant woman?" she asked, her tone incredulous. "A woman pregnant with triplets? Darling, I can explain—" Mason reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "Explain what, exactly?" Vanessa demanded, taking another step back. "That you have 3 10-year-old sons you've never acknowledged? That you abandoned the woman who now runs a company larger than yours?" By now, small groups had formed throughout the penthouse, executives whispering urgently and glancing toward the unfolding scene. The string quartet had stopped playing entirely, the musicians themselves captivated by the drama. Several board members of Reynolds Enterprises had moved closer, their expressions grave as they witnessed their future president's public unraveling. "Boys, come meet your father," Sophia said calmly, placing a gentle hand on each of her sons' shoulders. "The man who said we weren't worth what it would cost to keep our silence." Tyler, the most outgoing of the triplets, approached Mason first, extending his hand with the perfect manners of a well-raised child. "I'm Tyler DeMarco. I'm 10 years old and I speak 4 languages. Do you speak any languages besides English, Mr. Reynolds?" The formal address, Mr. Reynolds, rather than Dad or Father, was a subtle but devastating indication of Mason's stranger status in his sons' lives. Mason shook the boy's hand automatically, overwhelmed by the confident gaze that mirrored his own. French. Some French," he managed. "Je parle français couramment," Tyler responded fluently. "Et italien, espagnol, et un peu de mandarin." Alexander approached next, his handshake firm and brief. "I'm Alexander. I won the National Mathematics Olympiad last year. My teacher says I have a unique approach to theoretical problem solving." William remained slightly behind his brothers, observing carefully before stepping forward. "I'm William," he said quietly. "I developed a solar energy tracking application last year. It sold for 6 figures. Each introduction was like a blow to Mason's solar plexus. These extraordinary children, his children, had achieved more in their 10 years than many adults accomplished in a lifetime. And he had missed it all, had rejected them before they were even born. Vanessa had moved to stand beside a group of her family friends, her engagement ring conspicuously twisted so the diamond faced inward, a traditional signal of relationship trouble among old money families. "Mason," a gravelly voice interrupted. Harold Winters, chairman of the Reynolds Enterprises board and Mason's godfather, had approached the group unnoticed. "I think we need to discuss some things in private. Immediately." Before Mason could respond, Sophia spoke. "Mr. Winters, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. I believe our companies have competing bids on the East Coast Solar Initiative." The old man's eyes narrowed as he recognized her. "Mrs. DeMarco, your company's innovation in thin film technology is impressive. Thank you. We're particularly proud of the environmental impact assessments. 0 toxic components, unlike the Reynolds proposal." The pointed business comment, delivered with perfect professionalism in the midst of personal drama, demonstrated Sophia's masterful ability to navigate both worlds simultaneously. Several investors exchanged glances, clearly reassessing the power dynamics playing out before them. Mason, watching his personal and professional lives collapse simultaneously, made a desperate attempt to regain control. "Perhaps we could arrange a proper meeting, Sophia, to discuss arrangements for the boys." "Arrangements?" she repeated, arching an elegantly shaped eyebrow. "They're not a business deal to be negotiated, Mason. They're children who have lived 10 years without a father because you decided they weren't worthy of disrupting your career path." A waiter passed with champagne, and Sophia took a glass with practiced ease. "To new beginnings," she toasted, the emeralds at her throat catching the light as she tilted her head. "And to consequences finally catching up with choices." Mason stood frozen, watching as Sophia and the boys moved confidently through the room, several of his own investors gravitating toward her, business cards appearing discreetly. His fiancée remained across the room in urgent conversation with her parents, her body language clearly communicating distress. "Mom, can we go see Central Park tomorrow?" Tyler asked, his voice carrying clearly. "I want to practice my presentation for the UN Youth Climate Panel." "Of course, sweetheart," Sophia replied. "After your brother's interview with MIT admissions." Each casual reference to the boys' extraordinary achievements drove the knife deeper into Mason's heart. These children, his flesh and blood, were prodigies being courted by institutions and organizations that would shape the future of business, science, and technology. And he had no part in their success, no claim to their brilliance. As the evening unraveled around him, Mason could only watch helplessly as Sophia DeMarco, the woman he had once discarded like unwanted baggage, gracefully accepted congratulations on both her business success and her remarkable sons, from the very people whose approval he had sacrificed everything to gain. While small groups formed with executives whispering and smartphones discreetly capturing the moment, no one could have predicted that by the following morning, Reynolds Enterprises stock would plummet 17% at market opening, forcing Mason into a public humiliation even greater than what had already begun. The New York Post headline blared across Mason's phone screen with brutal clarity: "Reynolds heir hid children from billionaire CEO." He scrolled frantically through the morning's digital papers, each headline more damning than the last. The Wall Street Journal opted for restrained devastation. Reynolds Enterprises shares drop amid family revelation. The New York Times went straight for the jugular. Triple surprise, Energy CEO confronts father of her children at Manhattan Gala. Mason collapsed into his leather desk chair, loosening his tie as panic constricted his throat. The penthouse, so alive with celebration just hours ago, now felt like a mausoleum. Caterers had cleared the evidence of festivity, but they couldn't erase what had happened. His phone hadn't stopped vibrating since dawn. Calls from board members, investors, family friends, all seeking explanations he didn't have. 3 missed calls from Vanessa, the last at 4 in the morning, followed by a text that simply read, "The ring is with your doorman. Don't contact me." Outside his window, Manhattan continued its relentless pace, unaware or uncaring that Mason Reynolds' carefully constructed life had imploded. He rubbed his temples, trying to process the events of the previous night. Sophia, the boys, his sons, the identical green eyes that had stared at him with curiosity rather than recognition. His father's voicemail had been succinct. "Fix this. Board meeting tomorrow. 9 sharp." A knock at the door pulled him from his spiral. His housekeeper entered, her expression carefully neutral. "Mr. Reynolds, there's someone here to see you." "I'm not accepting visitors," Mason snapped. "She says it's urgent. Ms. DeMarco and—" The housekeeper hesitated. 3 young gentlemen. Mason's heart hammered against his ribs. "Show them in." Moments later, Sophia entered, as composed as she had been the night before, though now dressed in an elegant pantsuit rather than evening wear. The boys followed, still in matching outfits, their faces solemn and curious. "I thought we should talk," Sophia said simply. "Away from an audience." Mason nodded, suddenly aware of his rumpled appearance, still wearing last night's shirt, stubble darkening his jaw, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. The contrast between his dishevelment and her polished composure was yet another reversal of their past dynamic. "Vanessa broke the engagement," he said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "I'm not surprised," Sophia replied without sympathy. 3 investors are reconsidering their positions. My father is furious." Sophia gestured for the boys to sit on the sofa across from Mason's desk. "Boys, why don't you take out your tablets? I need to speak with Mr. Reynolds." They obeyed immediately, each producing a device and becoming absorbed in what appeared to be advanced educational programs. Mason couldn't help but stare at them, at the way Alexander's brow furrowed in concentration just like his own, at Tyler's confident posture, at William's thoughtful expression. "They're extraordinary," he whispered. "Yes," Sophia agreed. "They are." "Why did you come today?" Mason asked, forcing himself to meet her gaze. "Why now, after 10 years? Was it to humiliate me? To get revenge?" Sophia's expression remained unreadable. "You invited me, Mason, with an arrogant note about your success. I thought it was time the boys met their biological father." The accusation in her calm words stung worse than if she had shouted. "You could have approached me privately, before all this." She raised one eyebrow. "The way you approached me during the past 10 years? The silence that followed was answer enough. Mason ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "I want to be part of their lives," he declared suddenly. "I can offer them the Reynolds name, connections, opportunities." "They already have all that," Sophia interrupted. "Alexander won the National Mathematics Olympiad last year. Tyler already speaks 4 languages. William developed an app that sold for 6 figures when he was 9. Each achievement was a blow, a reminder of all he had missed, all he had thrown away. "I can pay retroactive child support," he offered, desperation creeping into his voice. "Help financially." "My company is worth $4.2 billion, Mason," Sophia said quietly. "Yours is worth what now? $3.8 billion after last night's stock decline?" The reminder of their reversed financial positions made him flinch. Once he had dismissed her as a burden to his future. Now, she had surpassed him on every metric that Wall Street valued. A small voice interrupted their standoff. "Good morning, Mom. Good morning, Mr. Reynolds." Tyler had approached, his tablet tucked under his arm. The formality of the greeting, not Dad but Mr. Reynolds, emphasized Mason's stranger status. "Did you sleep well?" Sophia asked her son, her voice warming instantly. "Yes, but I'm hungry. The hotel breakfast ends at 10. Sophia checked her watch. "We should go then. We can continue this conversation over breakfast if that's acceptable." The question was directed at Mason. 20 minutes later they sat in the penthouse dining room, the housekeeper having hurriedly prepared a spread of fruits, pastries, and eggs. Mason watched, fascinated and heartbroken, as Sophia interacted with their sons. The small touches, inside jokes, and seamless understanding that came from a decade of devoted parenting. "Alexander prefers his eggs very well done," she explained, noticing Mason's observation. "Tyler will eat anything but dislikes blueberries. William needs protein in the morning or he gets headaches by noon." These intimate details of his own children were foreign to him, basic knowledge that any father should possess, yet he was learning it as a stranger would. The boys ate with impeccable manners, occasionally glancing at Mason with undisguised curiosity. When William reached for the orange juice, Mason noticed a small scar on his wrist. "How did you get that?" he asked, the first direct question he'd managed. William looked surprised at being addressed. "Chemistry experiment when I was 7. I was trying to create a more efficient solar cell and the glass broke." "He needed 5 stitches, Sophia added, "but the design concepts were sound. Our R&D department developed it further last year." The casual mention of a 7-year-old's innovation being developed by professional scientists was yet another reminder of what these children were: prodigies, raised by a mother who had recognized and nurtured their exceptional gifts. "We need to discuss visitation," Mason said finally, setting down his coffee cup. "I want to know my sons." Sophia considered him for a long moment. "We can arrange supervised visits," she replied. "But understand something. You are not necessary in their lives. You never were. They have a complete family, exemplary education, and a brilliant future." The bluntness of her assessment made Mason wince. "They deserve to know their father." "Yes," she agreed unexpectedly. "They do, but on my terms, not yours." As breakfast concluded, the boys thanked their host with perfect politeness before gathering their belongings. In the elevator lobby, Mason made a final, desperate attempt. "Sophia," he said, her name unfamiliar on his lips after so many years. "I'm sorry. For everything. I was wrong. You are extraordinary." She smiled then, a genuine expression that transformed her face. "I always was, Mason. You just couldn't see it. And now that realization means nothing to me." The elevator doors opened and the family stepped inside. The boys waved politely through the closing gap, their identical green eyes, his eyes, the last thing Mason saw before he was alone again. He remained motionless in the hallway, the full weight of his loss finally hitting him. He hadn't just lost a family, he had lost the most brilliant partner he could have had, the dedicated mother who had raised 3 prodigies alone, and the visionary woman who had built an empire larger than his own. In Boston, 1 week later, Sophia sat in her office signing documents that would allow Mason monthly supervised visits with the boys, contingent upon his participation in therapy and responsible parenting courses. "Don't you think you're being too harsh?" Yasmin asked, watching her friend authorize the strict visitation schedule. "It's not about harshness or revenge," Sophia replied, looking through the window at the harbor where her new floating solar panels generated clean energy for half the city. "It's about protection and consequences. The boys deserve to know their biological father, but on my terms." "And what about you? Are there still feelings there?" Sophia smiled genuinely. "The only feeling I have is gratitude. If Mason hadn't abandoned me that night, I would never have discovered my true strength." She placed the signed documents in a folder, her decision made. The past decade had taught her that true power came not from revenge but from building something meaningful from devastation. She had transformed abandonment into empire, rejection into innovation, and heartbreak into purpose. Mason would have a chance to know his sons, but he would never again have the power to define her worth. That had been his greatest gift to her, though he'd never intended it, the opportunity to discover her own value, independent of his or anyone else's validation. On the horizon of Boston, DeMarco Innovations' new solar panels gleamed under the setting sun, converting light into energy, just as Sophia had transformed pain into power, rejection into determination, and abandonment into triumph. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.